today's workshop, which is all about CVs for the UK job market. I'm just going to briefly introduce myself. My name is Rita Kapadia, and I'm one of the career consultants at Brunel University. My speciality is electrical engineering, most of the art subjects, and I also work with MBAs. But we're actually a big team. We're a team of 8, and we've all got specialist areas. Okay, so at this stage, I'm going to turn off my video and just start off with an overview on what we're going to cover today. So we'll start off with CVs. And then I will talk briefly about covering letters. We'll also have a look at some online resources. And then finally, I'll just sort of share the link about how to book a careers appointment. Okay, so let's start off with the CV makeover. Essentially, the curriculum vitae, your CV, is a way of displaying your key criteria, experience, your education that's going to match the job description, the job role that you're applying for. So it's really your key selling document. Okay. And I will say that it is quite boring writing your CV, but as I've just mentioned, it is your key selling document. It's what's going to get you to your first interview. So it's really your golden ticket to get into the interview stage. With so many applicants applying for the same job, the UK market is extremely competitive. So that's why, to make sure it's important to have all your education, your experience, your relevant skills on that CV. So we're going to go through some of the key elements and the essential components of the CV. And I'm sure you're all aware of how to start off with your CV, but I'll give you some useful tips as we go along. So for the UK job market, your personal details, as you all know, will include your name, your address, but do not include your date of birth or your nationality. That kind of detail is irrelevant. You also don't need a photograph in your CV unless you're applying for performing arts jobs such as acting. After you've got your contact details, then have a profile. So that's really a concise statement that highlights your key attributes, and what you should do is pick up a few sort of relevant achievements and skills, and also express what your career aim as well. So it's just a brief summary about your current status, some key achievements which should be tailored to the job you're applying for, and also what your final career aims are as well. And that profile should really be tweaked for each job role. So it needs to be tailored. Okay, so after that, also include your education. So again, this is just a list of all your education, and including professional qualifications. You can actually have a separate heading for additional professional qualifications. Always start the most recent first, and always include specific relevant modules as well. So not every single module, but definitely something that would be relevant to the role you're applying for. Okay, if you've got any kind of work experience, if it's relevant to the sector that you're applying for, put it before the education section. But if it isn't, then put it afterwards. Key achievements as well, and also skills. Employers like to see what you've achieved. And if you can quantify that or make it in or give some qualitative evidence, that is also very useful. Again, the key skills should be very much focused on what the role requires. And then you've got interests as well. Be careful with interests, don't just write the same old boring stuff such as socializing, going to the cinema. Instead, talk about relevant interests. So if you are, say, working in the IT industry and you keep up to date with latest trends, such as something like Chat GPT, what's going on in that sector, or any other artificial intelligence programming, add that in, that show what you do outside of your studies to keep up with the sector that you hopefully wish to work for. Because that tells a recruiter something about your personality as well. So that's really important. So definitely have an interest section. And then references, simply say available on request. You do not need to write the referee's name and contact details. So I've already said that the CV is your key selling document. It's your marketing tool that's going to attract a potential recruiter. So it needs to stand out, you know. So if you're predicted a first class, or you might be on the borderline of a 2-1 or a first, in that education section in brackets, write, you know, predicted first class. I think it's important to show off and be boastful of your skills and not to be too modest here, because it's important to catch the eye of a recruiter. And when you're trying to demonstrate your key selling points, how do you do that? Well, you talk about your strengths. If there's anything you've done in your studies or outside of your studies which is particularly useful to the role you're applying for, mention it. Talk about your achievements. Highlight those relevant skills and any experience, because all of this is really going to showcase your personality. So don't be afraid to sell yourself. So your application really needs to demonstrate your passion for the company or the job and any achievements which relate to the role. Okay. This is quite an old infographic, but I quite like it because it's still really relevant today. The first application is received 200 seconds after a job is posted. And this does surprise a lot of people, but the average time spent looking at a CV is 5 to 7 seconds. So you've spent so much time drafting your CV, and then you think, well, is that really all the time that the recruiter spends? Well, if they like what they see on the first page, they will be inclined to look at it in a bit more detail. But that is the average time, because for each position, hundreds and hundreds of applicants are applying. So the competition is really tough. Now, although the statistics generally say that there's a 17% chance that your cover letter will be read, I always think it's a good idea to include a cover letter. It kind of just gives some context as to why you've applied to the job, and also your understanding of the organization. And these days, if you're sending your CV by email, you're not just going to say, please see attached my CV. Your email will essentially be your cover letter. Okay, so be very careful with spelling and grammar. We're going to do a little exercise towards the end of the presentation, but if there's any spelling mistake in your CV, straight away your application is going to be discarded. So be careful of that. I like to share this example, but I know somebody who applied to Guinness a good few years ago and spelled Guinness incorrectly. So just make sure that you do double check, because not everything is picked up by the spell checker. Now, I assume a lot of you guys are using Instagram these days versus Facebook, but do make sure that, you've got your privacy settings set up, because recruiters do have a look at what you're posting on in your social media online platforms. So be very, very careful of that. 76% of CVs are ignored if your email address is unprofessional. Have a separate email address with your first name and second name, and have it, completely separate from all other emails. That's extremely important. On average, 250 CVs are received for each position. Well, this was quite a few years ago. That number is in the thousands now. So obviously it depends on the sector as well. So that's why you need to make your CV really stand out. Now, a crucial statistic here is a lot of recruiters are using LinkedIn to find suitable candidates. So, once your CV is looking in good shape and it's got all your experience, your education, transpose all of that information onto LinkedIn, because over 90% of recruiters these days are actually finding suitable graduates using LinkedIn. So really useful tool also in helping you to find jobs as well. Okay, 88% job rejection rate if you have a photo of yourself on your CV. So definitely do not include a photograph if you're applying for UK roles. The only time, as I mentioned, you need to include a photograph is if you're applying in the performing arts sector. 1 in 3 candidates rejected based on something that the employer found out about them online. So really interesting stats, and I think it gives a good overview of what you should and shouldn't consider when you're compiling your CV, and also in terms of LinkedIn, how to showcase those skills on an online platform. Okay, so moving on from that. So ways to make your CV stand out, and I guess I've mentioned some of that. Really elaborate on your achievements, use a professional email address, as I mentioned. If you haven't got a LinkedIn profile, definitely set one up. Even if you haven't got lots of experience, start getting the basic foundation of your LinkedIn profile set up, and then definitely include the short link in the personal details on the top of your CV. And anything that you're sort of reflecting in your work experience or your professional experience needs to be clearly evidenced. And I can, again, talk about this in terms of using the STAR process, which I'll show you in the next few slides. If you've got any links to your work, again, add the short link in as well. Okay, so let's move on to the different styles of CV. So you've got a chronological style CV. This is the most common one. It can be also termed the traditional CV or a graduate style CV. So this is where you've got your name, your personal profile, you've got your recent education, experience, and voluntary work, interests, and then finally references. So this is just a very simplistic example of what it would include. Now, a CV can be 1 pages or 2 pages, but never more than 2 pages. You will lose a reader if it's any longer than 2 pages. I do know sometimes in the finance sector that generally recruiters prefer to see a 1-page, but I think there's nothing wrong with actually having a very detailed 2-page CV as well. So again, just sort of reiterating what I've said, there's your contact details, a short personal profile. All this example says I'm a final year maths undergraduate customer service. So they talk about themselves in the first person. I would use a third person format. So, you know, rather than saying I'm a final year maths student, I would say something like currently a final year maths undergraduate with key skills in this and that. So you're not saying I did this, I did that, but I just think it's better to sort of demonstrate and talk in a professional language on your CV by using third person format. So again, the other thing I would do slightly different to this example is actually make the degree title bold and not the university name. So your degree title stands out, include some relevant modules. If you've got any grades which are C's or D's, I suggest not including them in your CV. Just say, you know, if you've done A levels, how many A levels you got, mention the subject names. If you have got A grades in them, then actually put them in there in bold so they again stand out. And the same for the modules that you might be doing in your undergraduate studies. If you've done exceptionally well and you've got an A for any of the modules, again, highlight that information and put it in bold. And again, experience. So I think important to sort of mention that recruiters don't expect students to have lots and lots of experience, but what they are looking for are students who are proactive. So if you've done some internships or you've done some relevant project work in the industry you hope to work in, mention that. And achievements as well, you know, really showcase any certificates or awards that you've won, even if it's not directly related to the area that you want to work for. And again, include any interest in sports. And then the final heading will be references, which I said simply available on request. Okay, so another format of a style of CV which is commonly used is a skills-based CV. So this is also known as a functional CV. So this style is useful where you've got limited experience or you're applying for a job that's unrelated to your degree. Now, again, this is just a snapshot view of a very simplistic skills-based CV. But what I will say is ultimately you have to decide, you know, what CV you feel most comfortable using, because you're going to have to evidence whatever is written in that CV during an interview stage. So whatever style you use, you know, it's entirely up to you, as long as you feel comfortable writing about your experience in education in that kind of format. So my personal favorite is a chronological style, but some of you might prefer a skills one. So for the skills one, again, you would start off very much the same, but your headings would sort of state the key skills and give evidence where you've demonstrated that particular skill. Okay, so I've talked about the importance of having a personal profile, and I think it's really important. So if you look at both styles of CV, for the chronological one, that's both reactive and proactive. With respect to approaching the job market, it's very targeted. The functional or the skills-based CV is more sort of a proactive approach. But again, it's for somebody who's thinking of maybe changing careers or moving on to a different field, and they just want to emphasize more about their skills and how they can be sort of more related to the sector. So it doesn't matter which style of CV you choose, it's important to have a career summary or a personal profile. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to an example. What's wrong with this profile? So you can just put your audio on, or you can put a message on chat. What do you think is wrong with this personal profile? So this person said, ambitious, enthusiastic, hardworking third-year student seeking challenging opportunities to utilize my skills where I can progress within the organization and develop the experience I'm looking for. An excellent communicator, team player, and have high quality organization problem solving skills with a strong eye for detail and the ability to get things done. So from what I've said, what do you think? Let me just have a look to see. No evidence to support the statement. Yes. Anybody else want to say anything? Anybody else? Okay. Well, that's exactly the case. It's very vague, it's general, it's cliched, and it lacks evidence. And there's nothing in there to give the employer an overview of the key skills which would be tailored to the role that they're applying for. So it lacks some key evidence. So here's some examples of the way you can actually write that personal profile in a punchy and a concise way that would attract a recruiter to sort of carry on reading more in your CV. So the top example is somebody who's got lots of experience in the pharmaceutical sector. Then you've got the computer science graduate, passionate about data engineering and machine learning, highly capable leader, having led multiple senior class projects to completion, and then they talk about their skills. And then again, a similar kind of example for the graphic design student. So I hope that gives you just an idea on how to write that career summary. Okay, so we've kind of highlighted that. I've highlighted this already by mentioning that it's really only seconds that a recruiter spends looking at your CV. So you've spent so much time drafting this fantastic CV, but they literally look at it for seconds. So all of those key headings need to stand out. So not just the content, but the presentation of your CV is extremely important. It's got to be, no more than 2 pages. And it's got to be bespoke and tailored. Look at some of those buzzwords in the job description. Don't just look at the job description and say, send and not tailor your CV or send the same CV for every single job. That's not going to work, especially when competition is really, really tough. And then when you're writing any kind of description for the projects you've done or any work experience, make it evidence-based, write down specific details. What isn't your CV? Well, it's not your life story. Don't write chunks and chunks of paragraphs. Think about writing things in a very concise way, and it's not a cut and paste job of the job description as well. And it's not something that's poorly targeted. So it's important to target that CV. Something to really mention is that a lot of CVs these days are actually reviewed using automatic tracking systems. So 80% of Fortune 500 companies, all those major players in industry out there, are using automatic tracking systems for recruiting students. So they scan your CVs and they look for all the buzzwords which should be in your CV, which match the job description. So important to really analyze the job description. So a good CV's focus on outcomes and provide dynamic, active language. So again, something to bear in mind, the content of how you write that description. Okay, so just to give you a quick idea on what we're sort of talking about when we're analysing the job description. So here I've just got an example of a job description. What I suggest you do is, now we have got a tool called Career Set at the university. So if you make an appointment with your careers consultant, ask about Career Set. But another thing you can do is just simply copy the job description each time and put it in a free word cloud generator. So there's an example here. So if I took that job description there, not about the company information, but from, like, you know, what you'll do and what you need to succeed, and I copied all of that section and put it in a word cloud generator, I would actually get all the keywords in the job description. And so then I would want to make sure that if, you know, there's particular words mentioned in the job description, well, that's what the recruiter wants to see on your CV. So include any kind of relevant skills, all of these buzzwords, and provide evidence of them, because that's going to make your CV stand out. So just a useful tip to sort of think about when you're drafting your CV or application. And also the kind of language you use on your CV as well. It needs to be written in a compelling and engaging manner in order to give the employer a real comprehensive overview of your education and experience. So these are the kind of words that you should include in your CV, because they're going to kind of convey a sense of confidence and enthusiasm when the recruiter reads it. And you're going to be more, you know, your CV is going to be more attractive to a potential employer. So look at the content, the language that you use when you're talking about your work experience or your projects. Again, important to showcase achievements as well. So again, this is just a very simplistic, I'm not going to go into detail, but the table of the kind of words that you should consider using. So these are very powerful descriptors, and it's going to, again, make a very strong impression by using such adjectives in your experience to a potential employer. And it's going to increase your chance of you know, getting your CV through to the interview stage. So it's essentially, as I mentioned, you know, your CV is your marketing tool. So it's important that you really go into a lot of detail about your experience and you highlight your key achievements, and you use such buzzwords as well. So when you're writing that description, use the STAR process. So STAR stands for situation. So if you're talking about your professional experience, or, you know, maybe some of the projects you've done whilst you're at university, or even your part-time work as well, this is the kind of technique you should use to frame that description. So explain the situation, you know, where you did that. What was your role? What was your task? Even if you were doing a group project, what was your task? Talk about the action. So if you were, even again, if it was a group project, what was your role? What was your remit? And then also mention the outcome. So if you've got a distinction for a project and it's relevant to the sector you're applying, again, mention that what you did and what the outcome was. So this is something that's important, not just in the CV, but also when you are going for an interview as well. So again, I guess we've talked about this already, the top tips. I'm going to skip this slide, but just some style tips. Use bullet points. I mean, don't have lots and lots of bullet points throughout your CV, but, you know, 4 or 5 maybe for the personal profile, and then some key bullet points when you're talking about your work experience or your internship experience or your voluntary work, or your interests, but not too, and avoid large blocks of text as well. You can also use lots of subheadings. You can also have a column format, so this split page. But I think, and there's lots of dubious information on this, I think for an ATS system, it's better probably not to use a column format and to just sort of use the whole page as in a one document without a column. Okay, so I've mentioned this already, but I'm just going to reiterate it. Your heading is not the words curriculum vitae. Take that off. I've seen it so many times. It's your name. You do not need your nationality, your marital status, your date of birth. and so forth, and avoid any negative information as well. So, you know, if you didn't do so well in your grades, or if you were, you know, left an employment early for whatever reason, try and just put some key information. And you don't need your full address of employers or schools or colleges either. Okay, so got a few more minutes. So I'm going to try and go very quickly to the cover letter. So the CV is about you and the cover letter is about the organization. It's got to demonstrate, you know, what research you've done. Keep it brief, you know, no more than a page, I'd say. And again, very quickly, you should have about 4 or 5 paragraphs. Start off by saying where you saw the position advertised. The second paragraph is key, I would say. You know, it's got to demonstrate your understanding for the organization. You know, you can start off by saying that you're an undergraduate and a final year student, really interested in working for the BBC because of this, this, and that. Now, don't just copy and paste stuff on the internet. Do your research. Find out what that organization is working on, if they've got any new projects that they're working on, or a new technology, and mention it in your cover letter, because it's really going to show the employer that you've done some research, that you're very familiar with what the latest trends are in their sector. And then the third and fourth paragraph is about your education, your experience, which would be relevant to the role. And then the final paragraph is going to be just a closing statement. Please see the attached my CV for your consideration, and I look forward to hearing from you. So that's just a snapshot view of what should be in your covering letter. So I'm going to show you a sample in a minute, but also just important to mention how you address your cover letter. So if there isn't a name, write "Dear Sir, Madam," end with yours faithfully. If there is a name, never address them by their first name. Always use their surname and end with yours sincerely. So that's the etiquette in terms of writing your cover letter. So there's lots of examples on prospects, and the slides will be available to you. So do have a look at some of the links. Also lots on Indeed as well. But the one thing I will say about Indeed is, it starts off by saying "Dear Hiring Manager." So that's a very American term, but here I would start off with either "Dear Sir or Madam," or "Dear Mr. So-and-so," okay? Right, so there's an example here. Now, I want you to kind of skim read this. I hope you can see it. But can you tell me what's missing in the first cover letter, but it's in the second cover letter based on what I said? So they all read really well. These are examples from prospects. But from what I've told you, what's missing in this first cover letter here to Mr. Smith? So it starts off really nicely, but there's something missing here. Can anybody see it? But it's in the second cover letter.
Company's name?
Yeah, not just the company's name, a bit more.
And the address of the company.
No, it's nothing to do with the address. Forget about the top, it's something else. I thought you had it there. Look at
Yeah,
the
Mrs. Conning.
And the subject, maybe logistic graduate scheme.
Addressing the person.
I mean, that's all fine. It's something in the content here. It's not in the first one, it's in the second one. Right, I think I'm going to have to tell you just because of time. Okay, it's this bit. Do you remember I said demonstrate your understanding for the company? Yeah, so there it is. I know media company has a strong reputation in the industry. I was particularly interested by work you did for da-da-da-da-da. So this is key. If you don't send the same generic cover letter to every single role, tailor it. Add something to demonstrate to the recruiter that you've done some research and you know what they're working on, because I think that really will help. Okay, just conscious of time now, so I'm going to skip this exercise, but basically it was just to sort of showcase that sometimes, you know, the spell checker doesn't pick up all the every single thing, every single mistake in your spelling. So here, if I just show you for this particular text, it would only have picked up, there's 8 errors, but the spell checker would only picked up 5. So always do a double check. Okay, so some common mistakes that people make: no target audience, poor layout, lack of headings, bullet points, tables and lines which don't format correctly, boring, unnecessary information, chunks of text, too much on the interest section, and inappropriate personal emails, and different kinds of fonts, small font, fancy fonts, just not easily legible. Okay, so I hope that gives you a quick overview on how to get started on your CV. We've got lots of examples as well. Use them as a guide, really. So they're on our website. Also have a look on the Prospects website, which is a national careers website. And there's lots of online free LinkedIn tutorials as well. Have a look at those. One particular template. So if you've got the key information right and you want to use a fancy template, have a look at novaresume.com. I think the 1-pager is free, but you have to pay for 2 pages. Okay, one quick test. Out of this sample, which one would you go for? Which one would you go for?
The one on the right side.
This one here, yeah? The one that's listed, the one with the photograph or without the photograph?
Without the photograph. I don't
Yeah.
think photograph is necessary in a CV.
Yeah, and also another point, if they're asking you to rate your skills, don't choose that kind of template, because why do you need to rate? Why do you want them to think you're better at some skills than others? I would want them to think I'm fantastic at every single skill. So don't have anything that asks you to rate your skills as well. So thank you so much for listening to me today. I've run over by a couple of minutes. I'll still have time to answer some questions. So if you want to book a careers appointment with your career consultant and get some bespoke advice, the link is there. You can also, so those appointments are 30 minutes, but if you want to make a quick query appointment on the day, then you can also book a 15-minute appointment and you can be seen by any careers advisor on duty.